Howdy guys, welcome back to the channel. This is Ben, and today I'm going to talk about something I'm kind of surprised I haven't already made a video about, and that's going to be removing wrinkles from clothes. So in this video, I'm going to show you a few different techniques that I often use when I need to take some wrinkly clothes and kind of iron them out. So with all that being said, let's just go ahead and dive right in. Alright guys, welcome back. So in this video, I want to show you a few different examples of different methods that I use when I'm reducing or removing wrinkles in clothing, because each method's going to depend on the photo, how much texture you want to preserve, and just the complexity of the clothes. So we're going to look at 3 examples in this video, kind of ranging from easy to difficult. The easy one being something like this, where because it's such a wide shot, we don't actually see a lot of detail in the fabric for the dress. So we can use some really kind of quick and dirty methods just to do a quick kind of clone stamp to kind of clean it up a little bit. Another example we have is when we have something where this is the same dress, a close-up shot, but we have a lot more of this fabric detail that we need to preserve, and using some other techniques, we can actually remove those wrinkles, but still, as you can see, preserve a lot of this fabric detail. And the last example is something I come across actually the most frequent, and that's going to be removing lines that are visible from underneath the clothes. So here we can see we have very visible lines of what she's wearing underneath this kind of tank top bodysuit thing. But with a few different techniques, we can clean it up and make it look really, really smooth while still preserving all of that texture in the shirt. Let's go ahead and start off with that first easy example. Okay, so starting off with this image, if we zoom in, we can clearly see there's a lot of wrinkles in this dress. But if we zoom in a lot, we can really see that because it's a wide shot, we don't actually have too much texture in this dress. We can see a few little lines kind of running this way, but outside of that, I mean, at this distance, you don't see any real texture of the dress. There's a little bit of kind of texture, but we don't see like the seam lines or like the fabric lines or anything like that. So because this is a wide image, and if I know I'm just going to social media where it's going to be viewed on a phone screen about, this size, I'm okay with just basically doing clone stamping and just to do it really quickly. So what I would do is create a brand new layer. Then I might come over here to my in-painting brush tool, make sure we're set to current layer and below. And I would maybe quickly go through and get rid of some of the kind of more sharper examples like that hair that's there. Maybe just grab this and just do a few of these kind of big wrinkles like this, just using the in-painting brush tool, because it actually does a pretty good job. Some of these fold lines I can get rid of. And yeah, when we're doing this, we're definitely kind of losing some of that texture, but as we saw previously, there's not really a lot of texture at this distance that I have to worry about kind of preserving. Once I've done that, I would probably just go ahead and go to my normal clone stamp brush, set it at a kind of a low flow so we can blend things together. Maybe we'll do like a medium hardness. And then I would just look for an area that doesn't have too much wrinkles. Like I'm going to sample from, say, here, and then just kind of start clone stamping these wrinkles out. So if I zoom out a little bit, we can see that's the before and that's the after. And yeah, if we spent the rest of the time to kind of go through and just kind of clone stamp it here, and so we kind of get it looking nice, maybe drop the flow even more if I want to try to blend in this kind of light area and dark area. You could also use the healing brush, where the healing brush, instead of it being a direct clone, the healing brush will try to blend the two areas together, which sometimes can work. Sometimes you can get a little bit kind of sloppy, so I don't use it too much. You can see there it kind of like, it blended things together. But to be honest, like if I'm just looking at this on social media, just really quick as a little post of like, hey, we're doing a little photo shoot, this is fine. Like this is more than fine. For what I would probably just do. I might spend some more time with it, but if I didn't have a lot of time and I needed to post something really quick and I just needed these wrinkles out, yeah, I would just do the healing brush. Maybe I can go back to my in-painting brush tool to get rid of some of these other sharper lines. But for the most part, this would be more than sufficient. And then I could spend some time to kind of get it looking a little bit nicer, a little bit more natural. But this took me probably less than 5 minutes to just basically get these wrinkles out. And again, if we're looking at it on Instagram or something, I can see these lines here kind of bothering me. But let's go ahead and drop our flow down and see if we can't smooth that little patch out there. Something like that, maybe. And yeah, when you do this, you are kind of smoothing out all the texture. If we zoom in a bit, you can see things just got really smooth, and we did lose a little bit of texture that was there. But like I said, if we're looking at it like this, yeah, that's fine. It doesn't look great, I'll be honest. I would probably spend a bit more time to get this area looking a bit more natural. Maybe I might kind of bring in, maybe reduce the opacity and bring in a little bit of that natural wrinkles underneath. But for this kind of image, that would be fine. Now, what if you have an image where you have to preserve the texture on the clothes, especially if you can see the actual like fabric texture? So how do we do that? So if we just start clone stamping, things are gonna get a bit messy. So I do have a close-up of this image, or as close as I took at the time. Now we can start to see some of that texture in the dress, right? We can see these lines, we can see the kind of fabric texture going this way. And so if we start clone stamping, this will just get really blurry and get kind of messed up and messy. So we need to preserve that texture. And I think the easiest way to do that is just going to be using good old frequency separation. So what I want to do first is go ahead and duplicate this layer. So I have a backup. I'm going to hit Command J on my Mac to make a duplicate of that. And then let's go to filters, and where are we at? Frequency separation. And so the trick here is we want to, on the high frequency layer, we want to keep and see all this texture, but we don't want to see the wrinkles. That's what we want to get rid of, right? So if we go our radius too high, you can see now we're seeing all the wrinkles. So I'm going to start bringing this down until I don't see those wrinkles anymore. About like that, but I can still see this kind of high little cloth detail. I like to try to get it as close as I can. The more that we do this, the more texture we preserve. The further down we go, we start losing texture. So I like to try to bring it in as much as I can. Just when those kind of big wrinkles are out. Maybe, let's try this, 1.5. I can see this. And it's also important to make sure that we don't really see the texture on the low frequency detail. We can see a little bit of line texture here. So maybe I will raise the radius up a bit more. It's always kind of, you can find a really good one. Let's go ahead and just do 2, the default 2. We have some of that lines here, but we can maybe fix that later. Let's go ahead and hit apply. And now we're going to be presented with a low frequency layer and a high frequency layer. What I want to do is click on the low frequency layer, and let's go ahead and make a brand new layer. So new layer. And this is what we're going to do to basically paint out the wrinkles. So what I like to do is turn off the high frequency layer so I'm not distracted by it. And we know we did a good job if when we turn off the high frequency layer, we no longer see any of that texture. So we know that the texture is being protected and being preserved on the high frequency layer, and we're kind of working underneath it. All right, so there's a few different ways you can do this. One way that I like to use when we're doing frequency separation is I like to use the healing brush, because the healing brush will kind of mix things together. So I'm going to go ahead and just start sampling, make sure we are on current layer and below. And I'm just going to start kind of healing these areas together. It's going to do its best to kind of, you know, blend them in together. Actually, my flow is a bit too low. Let's bring the flow way up. Okay. So something like that. I could probably come over here and try to heal up this here. All right. And let's go ahead and turn on the high frequency layer. And so there you can see we still have all of our texture, but we just removed those wrinkles. So another method you could use is also using the patch tool. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this one off. Let's pretend we're starting all over. Let's go over to the patch tool, and the patch tool works. So again, we're still going to be painting on this low frequency layer. I'm going to make a brand new layer. We'll call this patch tool. I guess we can call this one healing. We can kind of separate them so we can kind of compare them. All right, so with the patch tool, Let's say I want to get rid of this area here. I'm just going to go ahead and select the area that I want to get rid of. Make sure we are set to current layer and below, and kind of move it around to another area, which I think is close by, and double click on it. And it should just get rid of that, right? You can do this again here, and you can kind of go over different areas. We could do something like this. Let's see. Sometimes it's hard to find a good area to sample from, so that might be a bit tricky depending on how many wrinkles are in your dress. But you could just sample from a totally different area, and it does a pretty good job of trying to like blend the two together. So you can see there, this is using the patch tool. We're able to kind of help smooth that out. It could be a bit smoother. We can tweak that later. You know, you could do the same thing here. And let's see, maybe just grab from this kind of area where it's a little cleaner. And so that might be a bit faster than opposed to manually painting everything in. So that is using the patch tool. Now, one more method, which is kind of interesting, is we can use blur filters, but a lot of people will use the Gaussian blur, but I kind of found using another blur, especially for clothes, like in this example, works really well. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is select on the low frequency layer. I'm going to grab my lasso tool or the freehand selection tool. Let's zoom in a little bit. And let's go ahead and actually see if we can grab a lot of this. Let's go ahead and just grab this whole area. I mean, maybe not the pocket, because that kind of makes sense that there's a wrinkle because our hand's in the pocket. So maybe we'll just kind of grab this whole area here, and we're going to see what this does. Okay. And so make sure, or it's good to have your selection at a feather so it's not really harsh, anywhere between like 10, 25, 30, whatever works good. I have it set to 25 right now. Just make sure you have the feather set before you make your selection. If you change the feather now, it's not going to affect the selection. But anyway, so now we have our selection. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate that. I'm going to hit Command J. So now I'm going to go ahead and deselect by hitting Command D on my keyboard. And we should have a layer that is just that little selection. And so now what I like to do is this, let's call this blur. What I like to do is go over to filter, blur, and use the motion blur, not the Gaussian blur, because the motion blur is pretty cool because it kind of sets, you can choose the direction in which you want the blur to go. And so by blurring it up pretty high, you can hold down the Option key to get a bit more precise angle, but you can see how like we can rotate this blur, and I can kind of rotate it in the direction that I think the dress would kind of naturally fall. Something like that wouldn't look natural, right? That wouldn't look natural, but maybe something about like, I don't know, like that. And this scale currently only goes to 100, but you can type in any amount you want. If you want to go higher, you could say 200, and that'll be much, much blurrier, but much, much softer. You could do something in between. Let's try 150. Hit apply. And let me go ahead and turn off this high frequency layer. So you can see here, we've smoothed out everything, really smooth actually. But by turning this high frequency layer back on, if we zoom in, we still kept all that cloth and texture detail while just smoothing out the dress. And that looks really, really good. Let's try it again. Let's go ahead and do another selection. So with that low frequency layer and that lasso tool, let me just see what happens just for fun. What happens if we just grab this whole thing? This may not look good, but let's just see what happens here. Maybe I won't grab the seam. I'm just kind of curious if it's going to look decent or not. All right, let's go ahead and duplicate that. Deselect. One thing I did forget to mention on the blur is, let me go ahead and take a look at it. Depending on which direction you blur, some of your blur might spill into other areas. So you might have to use the eraser tool or a mask to maybe, for example, I don't think it did too much, but sometimes it might blur into the finger or it might blur past where you want. I would just come over here with the eraser and just kind of start erasing that blur. But anyways, back to our low frequency copy. Okay, here we go. Let's call this one blur 2. And let's do the same thing. Let's go ahead and go to filter. Now you can do repeat motion blur, which will give the exact same settings before, but because this is going in a different direction, I want to make sure I can change the direction of the motion. All right, so here we can see, so you see what I mean? If you go this way, you're going to get blurred outside the edges, but you can always fix that. Holding down the Option key to get a bit more of a direction I like. Maybe we'll do something like that. I don't know. Let's hit apply. And so because our blur did go a bit outside, I would probably just use an eraser. Let's go to my eraser tool here. And I would just kind of erase. You can kind of see here where it kind of bled into the edge. I would just come and erase that. Or use a mask if you wanted to be like really precise. I'm just gonna come down here, holding down Shift to move quickly down and then erase it. And to be honest, like that, the pleat is a bit, actually the way, I guess we kept the wrinkles going the same direction. So that looks pretty good to me. I think that looks actually pretty natural. And because we are working below the high frequency layer, you can still see we have all that nice texture. Now, as you can see, there are still some remaining wrinkles here, which are very high frequency. So what I would probably do is just, you could paint directly on the high frequency layer. More than likely, I like to just do it on a brand new layer and just go to my normal clone stamp. We're going to do 100% hardness just to make sure the edges stay sharp. And I would just come over here and make sure we're set to current layer and below. And I would just come over here and just kind of get rid of that. And it should do a pretty good job of preserving the texture. It did reduce it a little bit, but that's fine. Okay, so now one other question you might think of is, let's say for example, let's see if I can find, okay, so here. So here you can see, this is where, I don't know where this one is, where are we? Yeah, this is the wrinkle that we got rid of. And because the clothes was wrinkled, you know, the texture kind of got squished together. And so we don't have any of that line texture here. So the way you can fix that is by painting directly on the high frequency layer. So with that high frequency layer selected, we're going to go to our clone stamp brush. Now this is very important because this is very different than before, is we're going to make sure we are set to current layer only, because we only want to be copying the texture from the high frequency layer and not any of the color or tonal information from below. And so with current layers only selected and our clone stamp brush, we can go ahead and just maybe grab some texture here. I'm going to go ahead and set everything to 100 right now. And you just kind of do your best to like line it up. And there we go. We can just paint in that texture. Like so. And I can't do it before, I guess I can undo, I guess. But you can see, so that is after, that was before. And there we basically painted in that texture. And you could do that in other areas as well. Other areas where you felt like the texture got a bit mushy. You could fix that. And so using those techniques, just like that, we can, let's go ahead and undo, or let's go ahead and select all this. Yeah, you can see our before and our after, and that looks pretty good. And because we're working with layers, at any point, if you feel something's a bit too much, we can lower the opacity a bit, maybe bring some of that natural, those natural folds back in. We have a lot of things we can do that work out really, really well. Now, as a last step, if you want to do some final adjustments with tonal range, I would probably use a dodge and burn step to fix some of those highlights that didn't get really corrected very well. So let's go ahead and do that really quick. I'm going to go ahead and make a curves adjustment layer. Let's go ahead and bring this up like this. And then let's go ahead and invert that. I'm going to hit Command I on my keyboard to invert it. And now I can take a white paintbrush with a low flow. And if I start painting, and you're going to see if I can start painting in that effect. But what I want to do, undo that, is I can subtly, you know, say for example, here we have some kind of dark kind of splotches. I can just come over here, use that brush to basically just lighten those areas up like so. And that way, because we're just making things lighter, we're not changing any of that pixel information underneath, we keep all of that texture information, which is why dodge and burn is really popular when you're retouching skin, because it doesn't affect any of the pixels underneath. You're just kind of making some of those tones darker or lighter. Here you can see things are a bit too light, so I could make a new curves adjustment, bring it down, invert it, and now I could do the same thing. We should probably label these. And I could come up with my burn layer now, and then I could just try to darken up some of those areas. You might have to come over here to your burn as well and use a little bit. Dodge and burn is something that does take a bit of practice, so it doesn't look kind of splotchy. But you can see, like, I didn't really do a good job, to be honest, there. But if I took my time and you're just kind of doing a little bit of areas here and there, you should be able to kind of even out some of these areas that are kind of a bit splotchy with the dark and lights. Or you could just, you know, try another reblur effect, something like that. But here, let's go ahead and turn everything off. So that's the before, that's the after. We got it looking pretty good, and we are still able to maintain a lot of that texture detail. Like I said, I would just probably come in here with some more dodging and burning, and probably just come here to try to like even out some of these textures, or maybe perform a stronger blur to make sure that this is just really, really smooth. But you don't want it to look too smooth, right? Because if it looks too smooth, it looks like she's wearing like a piece of cardboard or something, which she's not. So, you know, I think it's a good idea to kind of play around with some of the different opacities, get it to where you think it looks, you know, natural, but not too distracting. Okay, so my next example is an example where we can't really use the blur methods or frequency separation because a lot of the things we want to fix are also on the high frequency. And to be honest, this is something that I actually use this method for the most. A lot of times I'm not really removing wrinkles, but as we see in this image here, let's go to my before. What I'm actually removing a lot of is I'm removing a lot of the lines that come through because of the undergarments, right? So if they're wearing a bra or their underwear or something, a lot of times you can see the outline of that shape through the clothes, and it can be very distracting. So here we have the model wearing a very tight bodysuit, but she's got this kind of underneath like strapless bra with some kind of clasp in the middle, and it's just causing very distracting lines, and it kind of takes away from the whole image. So using a technique I'm going to talk about now, I'm able to clean it up and get those lines really, really smooth while still preserving all this texture that's in this kind of tank top here. So in a situation like this, I would be using mainly dodge and burn. And to be honest, I only use dodge and burn to achieve this effect. I didn't use any frequency separation. This is all just dodge and burn to do that. A little bit of clone stamping to fix some things, but actually I think it's 99% dodge and burn. So let me go ahead and show you how I do that. All right, so why wouldn't we use frequency separation in this situation? Well, we can try. So if I go ahead and take the before, let's go ahead and just duplicate it. Let's do frequency separation. Let's just try to make sure we have no texture detail at all on the low frequency layer, which is about here. But then if we do that, we can't really have much effect if I come over here and start healing on the low frequency layer. We can get rid of a lot of it and we can get pretty close, but there's still a lot of this high frequency detail. We can kind of get rid of this here and do that. And yeah, this actually does get you pretty close. So this is a pretty easy and a valid method. But what I did, let's go ahead and delete all this, delete all this. What I did, I just did this purely with dodge and burn. Now this does take a bit more time and a bit more precision, but I think it's going to yield better results. So just like before, I'm going to go ahead and use my dodge and burn macro I've made here. You can download my macros. I'll put a link in the description, but I have some videos explaining how I make these. And these are just already set up to be dodge and burn. I might actually go a little bit further because we have to make some pretty big adjustments here, like so. And then if you want to work with a black and white layer so you're not distracted by color, an easy way to do that is just to go to layer, do a new fill layer, set that fill layer to black, and then set the blend mode to color. And that gives you a really accurate and representation of black and white. So you're just seeing the tones and we're not being distracted by color. So going back to my dodge and burn, let's grab a paintbrush. Let's make our paintbrush white, 2% flow, 0% hardness. And this is where we're going to come in here and start painting. Here I'm using the dodge to start making the areas that are dark lighter. And you can see what I'm doing here. And I'm just trying to get it to blend in with the rest. I can even come over here and fix these little things. And then I'm going to switch to my burn and try to make this lighter part darker so that I can blend them in together. And it's going to take a little bit of back and forth. And like I said, it's something that does take a bit of time and practice to get good at. So I'm going back to dodge. Let's go over here. Kind of zoom in, zoom out. Dodge and burn, it can be hard to do. It's hard to get good at it. And I'm not even saying I'm the best, but it's hard to get good at it where you do it where it doesn't look splotchy. If we look at what I've painted, you can see that's my burn and that's my dodge. And so you can see there's a parts where I've made it a little bit darker and lighter here and there. But if we zoom out a little bit and we turn that off and on, that's before, that's after. And then now seeing it at this distance, I can definitely see this area here I want to fix up. Now, because this is something where you have to kind of be a little bit creative, because this cup shape underneath, it's kind of reshaped the whole shirt, which means that we're going to have to use dodge and burn to kind of reshape it into what we think is more of a natural shape. And sometimes that's just going to take a little bit of creativity, a little bit of trial and error, a little bit of practice, because yeah, we're having to, now that we don't have something underneath the clothes kind of protruding out, that kind of reshapes how it would look, right? So let's see if we can do that. Let's actually make that a little bit. And you can see here that I'm actually dodging areas that weren't even affected. But like I said, because we removed that line, it's kind of affecting everything else. Now, like, because that's not there, the whole shape would be different. We're way too dark over there. And so now I think that's before and that's after. Let's go ahead and turn our color back on. And so I think that looks pretty good. There's a lot of moire at this distance. Now, one thing you're going to notice, and it might be hard to see on YouTube, is there is some color difference between where we dodged and burned here. It's hard to see, I think, but the colors are a little bit oversaturated. So one way I like to correct that is make a brand new layer. Let's go ahead and set this layer to color. Then I'm going to go ahead and grab my color picker tool. Let's change our radius to about 17 by 17. Let's switch back to our paintbrush tool. Let's hold down Option on my Mac, and just so I can hold and move the mouse around or click down to kind of pick a color. Let's pick a color around here. And then I'm just going to paint that color in using my paintbrush with the color blend mode. And you can see like that's the color I just painted in. And I know it's going to be really hard to see here on YouTube, I think, but by turning it off and on, there is a very subtle color difference, because when you are dodging and burning, especially when you're doing it quite at a high intensity, it does have an effect on saturation. You can come over here and change the blend mode from normal to luminosity. And sometimes in certain situations that will have an effect, but you can also just correct it by using a color blend mode layer above everything and paint it in. So using that method, let's go back to our white and black paintbrush. I can come over here, and you don't have to work with black and white on. Sometimes I don't, sometimes I do. It's easier for me to look at it in black and white because I'm not being distracted by any color, and I'm only seeing values of just dark and light, especially when the colors do get a bit desaturated or oversaturated. It could get kind of confusing. So it's just easier to kind of look at it like this. But let me just finish this and I'll show you what it looks like. Alrighty, let's go ahead and turn off black and white. And so there you can see this is this is after, and that's before and after. And let's zoom in a bit, before and after. So you can see here where like this clasp or something in between, you know, it's really almost kind of protruding out. And so the light is hitting the top of it really harshly and it's causing a harsh shadow. But yeah, so you can see there, I had to kind of reshape everything. And if I wanted to even more, get a bit creative, you know, I could kind of reshape other parts, because yeah, even though we're just removing those wrinkles, especially in this situation, that has kind of reshaped the whole shirt and the shape of everything in general. So we're going to have to be a bit creative. Now, one last thing, if you're really, really detailed, and again, we have some mist color here, so I can come back to my clone or my color layer. Let's hold down Option with a paintbrush, and then I would just come over here and kind of fix some of these like color differences that I'm seeing that probably you can't even see on YouTube, but they're a little bit visible here. All right, so another thing that you might see is because we had that really strong shape underneath, you can see where the texture lines are kind of bent. They're kind of going, let me go ahead and paint something here. You can see like the lines are kind of going like this, and then they kind of have like a sharp angle, like where I guess the edge of that cup was. Now, in all honesty, at this distance, you're not even going to see it or care. But if you're doing something where it's more detailed, this is where I might actually come over here, and I'm going to go ahead and just duplicate, or I guess I'm going to go ahead and do a layer merge visible, and then I would go over to my liquify persona, and then let's make this a lot smaller, turn off the show mesh, and then I would probably just kind of liquify these lines a bit, as careful as I can without, you know, blurring them or getting too messy, just to kind of liquify out that kind of sharp bend that was in them. Again, I think I didn't even do this when I actually edited this image the first time, but I could see situations where if the clothing is a lot closer and the texture lines are a lot closer, you might have to do that. So you can see like just kind of moving those lines over a bit, it kind of removes that little thing there. And then, you know, if you later on, I can come over here and fix all this stuff. But with dodge and burn, just dodge and burn by itself, you know, you can get it looking pretty good. I mean, at this distance now, I can see there is final dodging and burning I want to fix. To be honest, like because of the kind of work that I do, if you notice in my Instagram or my other videos, you know, I shoot a lot of fitness. I shoot a lot of female fitness competitors, fashion type model stuff. And so a lot of times, this is probably the most common use of me having to kind of remove the underwear lines or remove the bra lines or the undershirt coming through the main garment. And so just by using dodge and burn, I was able to really clean up this image. And so it definitely makes it less distracting when you don't have the undergarments being shown through. But anyways, so that is how I remove wrinkles from a very easy and simple, quick method to a bit more complex method where you're preserving texture, to a method where you're doing a very more intricate dodging and burning to preserve all that detail. So probably one of the best things you can do is using a combination of all of these methods to suit the image that you're working on. Sometimes you might only use dodge and burn. Sometimes you might do a mixture of frequent separation and dodge and burn with some clone stamping. You got a lot of options available to you. So anyways, guys, this is probably a long one again. I always don't plan for them to be this long, but I guess I just have a lot of information I want to convey. But I appreciate you guys' support. I know it's been a while since my last video, just got a bit busy. So hopefully I'll be back into making videos on the regular. So with all that said, I guess I will catch you guys in the next videos. And always appreciate you guys' support. And until then, peace.